Hello, welcome to a roughly unscripted video about deinterlacing, specifically about deinterlacing footage that's originally in 480i at 60 fields per second, where it's not just like two fields being the same frame, but it's like each of them is like its own thing, but it's also like 480i and it's like one smooth image. And I want a way of deinterlacing that to display on digital screens that don't really have any sort of like neat way to do their own deinterlacing in a way that keeps it looking smooth, like 60 frames per second, but also doesn't have the background look too flickery, but also like doesn't like blur things too much. It's kind of hard to explain, but I'll start off by showing off the default things that OBS can do for deinterlacing. So I can't really record OBS while using OBS, so I have some pre-recorded stuff from earlier tests I was doing. Anyways, this is blend 2x, which blend means that just blend by itself means that it blends both fields together, and that makes it be 30 FPS, which is very much not what I'm looking for. So I thought that blend 2x would mean it did that, but for 60 frames per second, and it would blend like fields 1 and 2, then 2 and 3, then 3 and 4. And maybe that's what it's meant to do, but it like didn't seem to be working quite right. For me, it like seemed to blend every other field. Every other frame seems to be like, this seems like somewhat properly blended, but then this is clearly like just two fields. Like you can clearly see the interlacing like not being done. Like it's not being deinterlaced. It's just like the two fields being thrown together with absolutely no blurring. And when you actually watch the thing, you can clearly see like the line from the interlacing not being done properly. So let me try to skip here towards the next thing I want to talk about that's relevant to. So this is the one that I personally like the most. Like for like if it works perfectly, like this is the one that I like because it's the one that most directly replicates how this would actually look on a CRT TV, in that each frame is only one of the fields. Like it's 240 lines, then another 240 lines, like just flickering back and forth. And if it's like 60 frames per second consistently and it doesn't drop a single frame, then this ends up looking pretty much how it would on a CRT TV. Slightly less blurry, so it's like there's a bit of flicker like on unmoving background elements, like especially if you go frame by frame, you can tell. But since lines are being offset, it's not too bad. Like they're being offset up and down the way they should be, and motion looks like properly not blurred at all, and each frame advances properly, so it maintains the right 60 FPS look. The only problem with this one is that if you're in anything that could ever possibly drop frames, which sometimes for me OBS drops frames, sometimes like YouTube or something drops a frame here or there. Like that's very noticeable. Like you can definitely see the image slightly get chunkier for a while. And if you pause the video at all, it's like noticeably lower resolution. And also there's the aforementioned thing where non-moving things are flickering. So what I wanted to do was to have something that kind of was like the thing I described earlier with the blend, like where I wish it was just like first a blend of frames of fields 1 and 2, then of fields 2 and 3, then fields 3 and 4, and so on and so forth. Where like it was like advancing, like each frame was in a way preserved, but like kinda they blend into each other instead of just like jumping into each other like they do in linear. But also like the point of the blending would be to like reduce background flicker and make it so if like if a frame drops here or there, it's not so obviously noticeable as like a dip in resolution. But anyways, what I got here is like, because the thing, at least for my capture cards, is that I can't actually use them in two sources at once. So what I did here is, in my scenes, I made a scene that's the actual capture card source. And now I just now realized that it's actually gonna switch to that scene when I click it. So it's gonna be not actually I could just bam. That's a real nice composite look. Anyways, there's the source of the captured card, and here there's the same, except you can see it's slightly dimmer, but I'll get to that later. Anyways, the point is it's the same the capture card going into two different scenes. And the reason I did that was so I could have here in the actual screen I use for recording, have both scenes placed in here. And one of them is just the scene by itself. Just just the default output of the captured card. And then the other one is if you go into the filters, I put some filters on it. One is the render delay, which makes it so that it's I didn't actually do. I tried doing the math. That was like a lower millisecond amount, and it didn't quite work properly. So I just went up until there was like a noticeable like 1 frame delay consistently, and that's actually the reason why there's this video over here. I did these. I did this like with the two of them instead of overlaid on each other. I did them side by side, and this shows that like they are consistently like one of them is consistently 1 frame behind the other. So that's the thing I wanted working correctly. After showing that that worked correctly, I went over here, and the other filter on that one that has filters is opacity, which is down to 0.5. And they actually tested different opacities, and you can kinda you'll be able to see that in the next video I have to show. But you can kind of choose different opacities for different like effects, I guess. Anyways, let me put this back to where it's supposed to be and pull up this video. Anyways, so here's an example of how this thing looks in 0.5 opacity. So that's like both of the frames being like, it's like pretty much half and half. Okay, there, now it's actually playing. And you can see that the background, like obviously compression kind of plays into it, but like you can see that the background doesn't have much of a noticeable flicker, besides just like slightly changing colors because composite. And let me wait until the bird moves more noticeably. You can kind of see that like the frames kind of like blend into each other, so it's like each frame is actually like two fields blended into each other. So you do lose out on that like neatness of having each frame just be a single field, but you can see that like each field is spread out across 2 frames, but they're sort of like done in a way where it maintains that 60 FPS like fluidity. Like you can see here, it's like showing half of the previous frame and half the next frame at any moment. I want to go to when one of the birds is flying with like more contrast. That would have been good, but I don't remember how to go frame by frame backwards. But you can kind of see how like it's sort of like in half steps. And if you actually just let the video play, at least to me that looks pretty fluid, like 60 FPS. Yeah, I feel like that's a pretty good compromise for me. But if you want to like, have the frames be more clear at the cost of having a more like flicker, you can actually like turn the opacity down below 50. Let me see when I actually did it. This might already be it. Let me see. Okay, so at that point I already turned down to 0.375, but now it's gonna go down to, I'm just gonna skip the quarter steps because for explaining this it's probably better to just do the clearer examples. So you can see now that like there's a more noticeable flicker in the background elements like the grass and whatnot. But if you bird movement, kind of get some bird wings. The wings are really good for this. Anyways, damn it. Okay, there you can see that like each frame's like more clear, and it's only like less of a shadow of like the previous frame. It's like it slightly remains like a blur, like the version of like the previous field. So it kind of helps ease that transition between the two different ones, the two different frames or two different fields. Like you can kind of see a remnant of the shadow of the wings, and it makes the bird slightly blurrier, but not by that much. And again, it does retain that the fluidity of the 60 FPS like movement. Anyways, if you go down here, I did a final test of like what it looks like when the opacity is at 0, which is pretty much just the same as it's same as the default line 2x, which you can see that there's a more noticeable flicker in the background elements because it's just like the lines are totally shifting up and down each frame, but also there's no blurring at all whenever there's movement. So that's like this would be the most fluidity, like the most like neat fluidity, but it does look kind of janky if a frame ever gets dropped, or like if for some reason at some point someone tries to copy the video and it gets copied over at 30 FPS, it will look just like really bad. It'll pretty much become 240p 30 FPS. So yeah, it really depends on your use case, I guess, which of these you would prefer to use. Like if you wanna I'm thinking of this like for like backing up some VHS recordings I have where I imagine that eventually someday these might be played someplace where frames get dropped occasionally, or maybe sometimes they'll like maybe someone might back up like try backing them up further in some way that somehow drops down to 30 FPS, and I would like those to at least like be watchable. Like I would want those to look all right, even if half of the frames are lost. So I would probably go with like either like 0.50, which is like the blurry one. Which I mean, these are like family recordings and stuff. It's not like having them be all fluid and stuff really matters to anyone but myself. But yeah, I just thought it was a neat thing to maybe share with other people who are interested in like the interlacing stuff. I'm mainly making this only like for my friends who I probably if you're watching this, I probably sent you the link. Also, hi. You all have the same obsessions with video bullshit as I do, so you're probably watching this right now. Hi, Drew. Yeah, I'm calling you out specifically. Anyways, I don't have an ending for this video planned. I'm just gonna end it now. 3, 2, 1, bye.